And President Trump is calling his Davos meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky positive, and Zelensky said a framework on security guarantees for his country had been established. Could this be a step toward ending the war? Joining us now is geopolitical analyst Brandon Weichert, who's also the senior national security editor over at the National Interest. Brandon, always great to see you. Today we have the trilateral between U.S., Russia, Ukraine in Abu Dhabi. What are your expectations? Do you expect the war to end?
Unfortunately, at this rate, I don't think the war is going to end through a negotiated settlement. I think what they're doing really is keeping the lines of communications open, so that when the Russians do actually defeat the Ukrainians, the Americans and Russians could potentially move on in a more positive light. I think this conflict at this point will be determined on the battlefield, unfortunately.
So then what do you think the outcome of Trump's meeting with Zelensky was? Because Zelensky seemed to indicate that, he had won some flavor of security guarantees.
Well, he very well might have, but ultimately those security guarantees are worthless. The United States cannot keep giving what it doesn't have. We're seeing this, by the way, the downstream effects of this war, in that, for instance, we are struggling to maintain an air defense capability in the Middle East, which is about to heat up right now. And that's precisely because those systems were depleted in the Ukraine war, and our defense industrial base cannot replenish them in a meaningful way, in a reliable way. And so whatever Trump is telling Zelensky, he's selling him the dream, as they say in real estate. I don't believe anything that we're doing is going to change the conditions on the ground at all.
And let's just talk about Europe's involvement, because after the meeting with Trump, Zelensky did blast Europe in his speech given at Davos. So what's happening with that element of this dynamic?
Well, clearly Zelensky is playing to Trump. I mean, clearly he has assessed that it's no longer, Trump being led around the nose by the Euros, which is how it kind of was for the last 8 months. But whatever was said in that meeting between he and Trump, clearly he now understands, he's going to have to figure out how to appeal to the man in the White House and not the people in Brussels. But again, I mean, Trump is a mercurial guy anyway. So he goes with, one way and, one day, and then he changes course the other. And that gives him some wiggle room. But, I think Zelensky realizes that the clock is running out. And, he's not going to be able to keep those eastern portions of the country. That regardless of what happens, the Ukraine is now going to be a bifurcated country.
Well, how far we've come from that fiery meeting where he came in, didn't wear a suit and, was slightly passive aggressive. Over to Putin. Witkoff and Kushner, they traveled directly to Moscow. I think they were up till 3 a.m. I don't know what they were doing with him so late into the night. So where's Putin stand in all this? And what's going on with Kushner and Witkoff? Because they have a couple notches in their belt. They're very seasoned at this.
Yeah, in many respects, Witkoff and Kushner have actually upstaged the professional diplomacy corps in State Department. I mean, they've been very successful at negotiation. I think what's happening is it's less about the Ukraine war. Obviously, that is being discussed, but I think the real momentum is in things like trade deals, rare earth mineral development deals. I think the Trump administration is thinking longer term trade and things like that beyond the Ukraine war. I think that they realize the Ukraine war is an insuperable wound. Neither side in that conflict will come to the middle. And so they're just going to keep moving ahead as if the Ukraine war didn't happen. And in fact, this is something you saw Kushner doing in the run up to the negotiations for the Abraham Accords, where I talked to him about this. He told me personally, he said, look, he goes, I'm going to proceed as if we're never going to solve the Israel-Palestine issue. We have to just sort of isolate that. And I think they're doing the same thing with Ukraine.
Such an interesting way to parlay what happened over in the Middle East to this situation that seems to go on forever with no end or solution. So with that, as we start to finish up, I couldn't let you leave without your view on what's going to happen in Iran. Obviously, you wrote a book about the Iran threat. So what Trump said, we're moving military assets into place. People thought that action would have already happened coming off the Venezuela action and at the peak of the protests. What's going on?
Well, as I said the last time I was on, he was going to strike until he was talked off the cliff on the 15th. But now he's got the Teddy Roosevelt is now in the Arabian Gulf. He's got the Carl Vinson on site. I think there's a third carrier that's about to be positioned. So my estimation is probably in the next 48 to 72 hours, there probably will be some kind of hostility initiated. Trump is going to go for the regime, I think, in an air war. He's also now got the Syrian Islamists. He has them going into the Kurdish part of Syria, but that's not what that's about. That's to set them up to go into Iraq, to go after those Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, because we pulled our troops out of those bases in Iraq. They're now up in Erbil, which is the Kurdish capital of the Kurdish state. So I believe there's a positioning of epic proportions going on, and I think in the next 48 to 72 hours, as early as then, you can see things heating up in the Middle East.
Well, anybody who watches our program, Brandon, knows that you completely called midnight hammer when nobody was saying it was going to happen. So you're calling 48 to 72 hours. I hope we can talk next week and break that down. Brandon Weichert, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
All right, bye-bye.